Good morning and a very happy Monday to all of my favorite people out there. Big, exciting news. I start my scuba diving certification this month, and I cannot wait. I had the opportunity to start on Saturday morning, but I was working, but we will get there. My goal is to have that completed before I head off to Seattle, since they, surprisingly, unbeknownst to me, have an insane amount of dive spots. I read there are roughly 70 plus locations within a 2.5 hour drive, not to mention the multiple right on the edge of the city, a brief walk away, and then endless more down the coastline. I can only hope to spot an orca or a giant Pacific octopus, I think they're called. They're in Puget Sound, so who knows? And more big news, Chad Daybell was convicted. I wrote this episode the day after the jury's decision, so I know I'm a bit behind, but this is amazing news. And here is a brief snippet from an ABC article, just to give you a little recap overview. Quote, a jury has found Chad Daybell guilty in the murders of his first wife and his second wife's 2 children in what prosecutors in Idaho said was a plot to pursue money, power, and sex. The verdict in the capital murder trial followed 7 weeks of testimony and comes more than a year after Daybell's second wife, Lori, was also convicted of murdering her 2 youngest children, Joshua, aka JJ Vallow, who was 7, and Tylee Ryan, who was 16, in a so-called doomsday plot. The jury began deliberations Wednesday evening, during which they were sequestered before reaching a verdict midday on Thursday, finding him guilty on all counts. Prosecutors have said they plan to pursue the death penalty for these murder charges, and the sentencing phase of the trial is set to begin last Thursday afternoon, so we should have more soon. Prosecutors claimed that Vallow and Daybell thought that the 2 children were, quote, dark spirits and zombies, and they conspired with Vallow's now-deceased brother, Alex Cox, to murder them in 2019, just about a year after the couple met at a religious conference. Daybell, who was 55, was also charged with murder and conspiracy in the death of his former wife, Tammy Daybell, who was 49, and she died on October 19th of 2019. Her cause of death was asphyxiation, which was revealed last year during Lori's trial. Prosecutors said that Chad, an author of books about the apocalypse, promoted spiritual beliefs to justify the 3 murders and had claimed that all 3 were possessed and marked for death. 3 dead bodies, and for what? Money, power, and sex. That is what the defendant cared about, end quote. So again, such wonderful news that unfortunately came from a very, very sad tragedy. I will try to keep you updated on a sentence, unless it's already come out and about life in prison or death row. It'll be one of the 2. In the meantime, let's get into today's story. Today, I bring you Kateřina of Komárova. My name is Eli, and this is Murder from the Morning. Murder in the Morning. Haha. My sources for today come from a lot from Wikipedia, unfortunately, an ABC article, and the rest I will list in the show notes, along with some awesome photos. We begin in 16th century Bohemia, an area that now makes up the majority of the Czech Republic. Komárova itself is a small town within Bohemia that still exists to this day. Katerina was born in the early 1500s to a small family of landowners, and we may have never even heard her name had she not met Jan Becken of Lazany. Jan, he held quite a bit of power as a burgrave, which is the official title for a ruler of a castle. Cool. When the 2 married, Katerina's social status skyrocketed. From a commoner to the wife of essentially a lord, I don't know what his equal would be, she gained power, notoriety, and wealth overnight. I have a theory that this sudden and expansive success is the beginning of her downfall, but we'll get into that. Jan's position was held at Karlstein Castle, which is a beautiful work of art set up high on these rocks overlooking vast, perfectly green woodlands. I highly recommend taking a... You know what? I'll put a photo of that down below. The castle itself still stands to this day and once housed the Bohemian crown jewels, so it seems like a pretty important position for this Jan Becken guy. As he worked his duties for the castle, his wife, Katerina, then came to oversee his personal estate. Quote, this proved a tough time for her serfs because Katerina imposed severe punishments on them, end quote. A serf, if you don't know, it means laborer or servant, essentially. Katerina, while her husband was away working at this castle, would physically and emotionally torture her subordinates, these serfs. It's believed she derived a great amount of pleasure in the act of causing pain to others. And here's where my theory sort of fits in. We hear stories all the time of people who have never wielded power in their life, suddenly gaining immense control, and this never tends to go over well. For example, you have Gerard John Schaefer, aka the Killer Cop. He spent his whole life searching for power over women, and when he obtained this said power as a policeman, the bodies piled up. Not to mention, status was everything in the 1500s, and Katerina went from a nobody to a somebody overnight and lauded this new lifestyle. Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of information on her early life before she became this noblewoman, but we can assume if she's causing pain on others, she may have been abused growing up. But that is no excuse to murder people, guys. Details of the exact torture methods that she used aren't available, but we can assume what she used based on the time and era. So I had to dig a little bit deeper to get Bohemia-style torture devices from the 1500s, but I found a few interesting ones. For example, she may have been a fan of the scavenger's daughter, and I will put a picture of that below. Quote, the device consisted of a metal rack shaped into an A-frame. The victim's head was strapped to the top point of the frame. The hands were at the midpoint and the legs at the lower end. The frame could fold, swinging the head down and forcing the knees up into a sitting position, compressing the body so hard they would force blood from the nose and the ears. The scavenger's daughter was conceived as a perfect complement to the Duke of Exeter's daughter, aka the rack, because it worked according to the opposite principle, by compressing the body rather than stretching it, end quote. Or, this is one of my personal favorites, the thumbscrew. It's basically a mini vice, like a just finger-sized vice, designed to either crush your finger or multiple fingers, or slowly twist and screw through them, leaving you with a bloody nub either way. Plus, both the scavenger's daughter and the thumbscrew could be hidden away when the husband came home to visit. It's a lot harder to hide a stretching rack or an iron maiden. Whatever Katerina's choice of torture was, the serfs had to endure it. Over time, rumors of her cruelty began to spread. However, it's a serf's word against a noblewoman's, so these rumors spread very slowly and without any real proof at first. According to the Blogspot article, quote, Jan Becken had long had a protracted disagreement with the dean of the Karlstein chapter. His name is really hard to pronounce. We'll call him Mr. Hayjack, who later became a respected writer. Rumors of Katerina's crimes eventually reached this dean, Mr. Hayjack, and he informed her husband, Jan, about said atrocities. But Jan took it as provocation and sued Hayjack. The court tribunal, chaired by Wojciech I of Pernstein, decided to examine the claims of Katerina in 1533. However, the summoned witnesses of the serfs under Katerina, afraid of being punished even further, described her as being kind and a good lady in the official interrogations. Until they reached one certain citizen in Prague. A relative of one of the victims, since he was in Prague, which was out of Mrs. Katerina's jurisdiction, he couldn't be harmed. He named this cruel woman as the killer of his relatives and other serfs, and his example encouraged many other people to change their testimonies in accordance with the truth." End quote. So now these serfs are beginning to speak out against Miss Katerina, and it's piling up. So she confesses. She admitted to killing at least 14 of her servants. But the real count has been speculated to be around 30 people, according to other survivors. Okay, and this is my favorite part. Honestly, the entire reason I chose to do this story. After her confession of guilt, the tribunal court ordered her to be locked away. But in no normal prison. She was ordered to be locked away in a tower without sustenance until her death. Like Tangled, but without food. I can't remember the princess's name. Oh goodness. Let down your hair. Who is it? That's gonna bug me. Rapunzel. I had to look it up. Embarrassing. Oh, there's a doggy outside. He's playing fetch. Quote, she was placed in the Miholka Tower at Prague Castle, where she died in March of 1534. She didn't make it long. As for Jan Becken, the tragic case of his wife's crimes had almost little to no effect on his life. After some time, he was even appointed as a high scribe and retained his position until his death in 1547. End quote. And that, my friends, is the story of Kateřina of Komárova. I love doing stories I've never heard of, like this one, but sometimes there's just so little information out there, and I feel bad leaving it. I don't know how many minutes I'm at right now. It's recorded in seconds, and I can't do that math. But I do hope you enjoyed this one. Like I said, short as it may be, it's interesting to try new things. Thank you all again so much for taking the time to listen in today. I really appreciate it. And if you'd like, stick around for a bit extra after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Hello. So we have two quick, huge updates today. Besides the chatty daddy, Chad Daybell. I gotta stop calling him that. One, the former Orange president was convicted on all 34 charges in his criminal trial. Round of applause. Can we please just end this Trump era once and for all? Ugh. I miss the days of throwing shoes, you know? And two, y'all remember BAUMEISTER, the serial killer from... Well, here, let me just read it to you. Okay. Titled, Some Victims of Indiana Serial Killer Are ID'd, but officials face stiff challenge, 10,000 bone fragments in his yard. Written by Korn Cesarek of People.com. More than 10,000 bone fragments were discovered on suspected serial killer BAUMEISTER's $1 million Indiana property in 1996, and his victims are still being identified. Authorities believe BAUMEISTER, who they say lived a double life as a seemingly upstanding family man, picked up men at gay bars while his wife and children were on vacation. Then, he brought them back to his Westfield, Indiana home, known as Fox Hollow Farm, and murdered them. He would bury their remains on the 18-acre property. Authorities believe he could be responsible for upwards of 25 murders, but have officially only linked him to 12. Less than 2 weeks after the remains were discovered in 1996, BAUMEISTER died by suicide. The New York Times reported in the same year he never faced any charges in connection with the slayings, nor admitted to any of them. At the time the murders took place, he was married with 3 children. In late 2022, Hamilton County Coroner Jeff Jellison, that's a cool last name, brought renewed interest to the case when he asked family members of men who went missing in the Indianapolis area in the 80s and 90s to submit DNA samples to the coroner's office to determine if they were a possible victim of BAUMEISTER. This week, on May 22nd, or a couple weeks ago now, the Hamilton County Coroner's Office in Indiana announced that another victim has been identified as Jeffrey A. Jones. He was reported missing in August of 1993, not 33. His remains were identified, quote, through extensive forensic genetic genealogy investigation, said the coroner's office. Earlier this year, on January 25th, the coroner's office also announced the identification of Manuel Resendez, whose remains were found in 1996. Additionally, Alan Livingston was identified as another one of Baumeister's victims through the same process. Quote, according to Jellison, investigators have 4 additional DNA profiles that have not yet been identified, bringing the total number of victims to 12. Because many of the remains were found burnt and crushed, this investigation is extremely challenging. However, the team of law enforcement and forensic specialists working the case remain committed, said Jellison. End quote. Huge. That's so huge. I love seeing old unsolved or partially unsolved cases come back to light with such renewed energy from people that were just babies at the time. I don't know how old this Jeff Jellison is, but they're trying and I love it. It's hopefully more identification to come. Well, that is all I've got today, folks. A big week in the world of true crime. Again, thank you all for listening. It's really pretty awesome of you. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you on Thursday. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.